How did an early human survive a shattered leg, a deep gash, or a bone driven through skin thousands of years before anyone had a hospital, antibiotics, or a trauma surgeon? Picture a hunter moving across a rocky ridge when the ground gives way. A leg breaks. Maybe the skin tears open. Blood is already soaking into the dirt. In the world we know, this is the beginning of a chain of phone calls, an ambulance, an emergency room, a surgical team. None of that exists yet. There is only the injured person, the landscape around them, and whoever happens to be close enough to help. And the danger does not end when the bleeding stops. A broken bone can leave someone unable to walk. An open wound can become infected. A person who cannot hunt, gather, or move with the group may need help not for hours but for weeks or months. So how did people survive injuries like this before anything we would recognize as medicine? Part of the answer is still visible in their bones. At Shanidar cave in what is now northern Iraq, archaeologists found the remains of several Neanderthals. One of them is known as Shanidar I. His skeleton reads almost like a catalog of injuries. He had suffered a serious injury to the left side of his face, probably damaging or destroying the vision in one eye. His right arm was severely atrophied. The lower part of that arm was missing, although researchers still debate exactly how and why it was lost. He also had damage to his legs and feet that would have made movement difficult, and later research found evidence of substantial hearing loss. Yet Shanidar I did not die when these problems appeared. He lived for years with them. He eventually reached somewhere around his late 30s or 40s, an unusually advanced age for the population represented at the site. That matters because this was not someone functioning with a small scar. He was living in a mobile hunter-gatherer society with major physical limitations. He could not have performed every task in the same way as an able-bodied adult, and yet his body had enough time to heal. Bone cannot tell us exactly what other Neanderthals did for him. It cannot show us someone bringing him food or helping him across difficult ground. But survival on this scale is difficult to explain without some degree of social support. Food, protection, assistance with mobility, time to recover. That gives us the first answer. Long before medicine became a profession, surviving a serious injury could depend on other people. But care alone does not solve every problem. Imagine the injury again. The bleeding has stopped. The broken limb is no longer moving. For the moment, the person is alive. Then, several days pass. Now another danger begins. Infection. Before antibiotics, even a wound that initially looked survivable could become deadly. And this is where reconstructing prehistoric medicine becomes much harder. Plant fibers, wooden splints, leaves, hides, and other organic materials usually disappear long before archaeologists arrive. A healed skeleton can show that someone survived. It rarely tells us exactly how the wound was treated. But occasionally, another kind of evidence survives. Not in a toolkit, in teeth. At El Cedron Cave in Spain, researchers analyzed hardened dental plaque from Neanderthals. Inside it, they found traces of plants these individuals had consumed. One individual had evidence consistent with serious dental problems and other illness. The same individual's dental calculus contained traces associated with poplar. Poplar contains salicylic compounds, chemically related to the active family behind aspirin. This does not mean Neanderthals had aspirin, and it does not prove that they had a standardized medical system. But it does suggest that at least some Neanderthals were consuming plants with pharmacologically useful properties. They knew their landscape extraordinarily well, which plants were edible, which were dangerous, which changed how the body felt. How deliberate that knowledge was and exactly how it was used is much harder to prove. Then, in 2122, archaeologists revealed something far more dramatic. Deep inside Liang Tebo Cave on the island of Borneo, researchers excavated the skeleton of a young person who had lived at least 31,000 years ago. The lower part of the person's left leg was missing. At first, that might sound like the result of an accident, but the bones told a different story. The end of the limb showed extensive healing and remodeling. The pattern was inconsistent with a recent fatal injury. Researchers concluded that the lower leg had been deliberately amputated, probably when the individual was a child. And somehow, the operation worked. The person survived. Not for a few days, not for a few weeks, for another 6 to 9 years. Think about what that means. More than 30,000 years ago, a group of hunter-gatherers removed part of a child's leg. Whatever technique they used, they avoided fatal blood loss well enough for the child to survive the operation. The wound healed without the kind of overwhelming infection that would have killed the patient. Then came the longer problem. A child missing the lower part of one leg still had to eat, still had to move, still had to live in a rugged tropical landscape. And other people had to make that possible. We do not know what blade was used. We do not know whether plants were used to reduce pain. We do not know exactly how bleeding was controlled. We do not know what, if anything, was applied to the wound. Those details are gone. But the survival is not. The healed bone is still there. And it pushes sophisticated medical behavior far deeper into human prehistory than researchers once expected. This happened tens of thousands of years before agriculture, before cities, before writing, before anything resembling a modern hospital. So there was never one secret prehistoric treatment that made serious injuries survivable. The evidence points to something more basic. First, the body had to survive the immediate trauma. Bleeding had to stop. A damaged limb had to be protected from further injury. Then the person needed time, food, water, protection, and, in some cases, long-term assistance from other members of the group. People may also have used plants and other materials from their environment in ways that rarely survive archaeologically. But this is where we have to be careful. We can see healed fractures, we can see long-term survival after disability, we can detect some plants people consumed. And in Borneo, we can see extraordinarily strong evidence of deliberate amputation. What we usually cannot see is the exact prehistoric procedure. There is no surviving instruction manual, no list of ingredients, no description of how a wound was cleaned or bound. So the most interesting evidence is not a lost ancient recipe, it is the people who survived. And that creates another question. Why keep them alive? A person recovering from a shattered leg cannot travel normally. Someone missing an arm or part of a leg cannot perform every physical task the way they once did. In a small mobile group, caring for that person costs something. Food has to be shared. Travel may become harder, other people may have to take on additional work. Yet prehistoric skeletons repeatedly show people living long enough for major injuries to heal. Shanidar 1 lived for years with serious disabilities. The individual from Borneo survived childhood amputation and lived for years afterward. These were not bodies abandoned the moment they became inconvenient. And perhaps that should change the way we imagine survival in the deep past. A group did not survive only because its strongest hunter could run fast. An injured person could still remember where water remained during a dry season. They could know how to shape a tool, recognize animal tracks, remember a dangerous route, watch children, teach, warn. A damaged body did not necessarily mean a useless person. And sometimes the most important survival technology was not something people carried in their hands. It was the group itself. A hospital concentrates care into a building. Prehistoric people did not have that building, but they were not starting from nothing. They had bodies capable of healing. They had knowledge of the landscapes around them. And most importantly, they had other people. People who could carry, feed, protect, wait, and stay. Long enough for a broken body to become a surviving one. The technology changed. The instinct underneath it did not.